Hey, somebody's got to sign for the UPS package. You have? Excellent. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. You are listening to The Professional Noticer. Here, you and I will use common sense and all the wisdom we can muster to move beyond what is true and go all the way to the truth. With actual listeners in more than 100 countries, I am The Professional Noticer. Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Andrews. Hey, thank you for making me a part of your week. My purpose here today and with every show we do is to play the part of a best friend or coach. I want to help you live the life you would live by giving you access to the greatest mentors the world has to offer today. Our sponsor this week is ITAM. That's IAITAM.org, pronounced ITAM.org. They're the only global member-based training organization dedicated to meeting the needs of IT asset management professionals. ITAM is the only global training organization turning out IT asset managers that corporations immediately hire all over the world. So check them out. How would you like to complete an accredited online program? You get an education to get a degree that is actually in huge demand. You might be saying, okay, in huge demand by whom? Hey, go to IAITAM.org and look through their client list. You'll see everyone from Sony Pictures to NASA to the United Nations. Google is one of ITAM's clients. Google, Yahoo, Facebook, Microsoft, Apple. These companies only hire people that ITAM has trained. They only hire these asset professionals for this particular part of their business that ITAM has trained. That's IAITAM.org. Observations and answers. That's what we do here on The Professional Noticer. Today, we're going to be chock full of observations because I want to hear some observations from my guest. I'm very excited about having the guy. He's the guy for audiobooks from my publisher. Please welcome Gabe Wicks. Gabe, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Good to be here.
I mean, are you worn out? We just actually got finished with 3 solid days of recording this latest book.
Which we should probably note is the longest it's ever taken you to read an audiobook. Because usually you're about a day and a half, maybe close to 2 days. But
this is the longest book I've ever written.
Well, that's true. That's true. But I can honestly say it didn't feel like 3 days. It felt like maybe 2.8, but not a full 3 days.
Oh my God! How many audiobooks do you produce a year?
Produce, it's in the neighborhood of about between 450 and 500 a year. But that runs a pretty wide gambit. There's, in that list there would be, reference books that are 15 hours long, and then there would be children's books that are 5 minutes, and everything in between.
See, I want to write one of those 5-minute books.
Okay, I'd like to record you doing one of those. That'd be a little easier.
And I don't know how you keep up with that.
I don't.
But really, so you supervise the program. And see, how many books have you and I done together?
Oh, gosh.
Do you know?
Well, we go back doing this to the first one we did together was 2006.
What book was that?
That was,
So 14 years.
Yeah, it's 14 years. Well, I before I was in my role now at HarperCollins, back when we were Thomas Nelson, I was over their video marketing, and so that's where you and I first started working together.
There. That's right.
Yeah, so if we take that back, now we're going back 18, 19 years.
Yeah.
So, it was funny getting to be with your family while I was down here, and particularly with Adam, who says, and we haven't met before. It's like, well, yeah, but you might have been in diapers.
Yeah, you were like a year and a half old.
It's been a minute, but I mean, we've done at least 7, haven't we? I think that's about right.
Yeah, at least 7.
And I know we went back and re-recorded one of them that for some reason was recorded elsewhere at one point. I don't remember the full story. I've tried to block that out. It's kind of painful.
Was that the Traveler's Gift?
We did re-record Traveler's Gift.
Because when Traveler's Gift came out, I'd lost my voice. Mm-hmm. Remember? Mm-hmm. I mean, and I'm not saying I had laryngitis for 3 or 4 days. Mm-hmm. It was like several months.
Right.
And so, and I remember they got somebody, I don't know, it couldn't have been you. You would have not made a choice like this because the guy that they had recorded, I was excited about it, but to give you an idea, and this is the kind of thing that drives me nuts about audiobooks anyway, because I listen to them just like you do, and I had written in The Traveler's Gift that David Ponder, when he met Lincoln, was surprised that Lincoln's voice was a high tenor, not the deep bass that it had been recorded or that had been Hollywood portrayed in movies. And this guy reading it goes, he says, David Ponder was surprised that Lincoln's voice was a high tenor. Good afternoon, David, said Lincoln. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you even paying attention? But it was awful. Mm-hmm. And so we got to redo that.
Well, you've had other books where your voice worked against you. The one I remember is, and I think it was The Final Summit. Maybe.
Yeah.
But what I remember is, and I should back up and say that everything that I've gotten to have the pleasure of recording with Andy has always been on Music Row in Nashville.
That's right. This is our first time.
Our first one to do it here. But so you'll come to Nashville and you'll be there 3 or 4 days. And there was, I think it was Final Summit where we had a dinner meeting with your publisher and their team the night before.
Yeah.
And if you don't know, Andy does like to socialize a little bit and talk a little bit. And
that sounds kind of weird. But anyway, go ahead.
But what happened was you were telling stories, in a loud restaurant downtown Nashville till late in the night, and you were so energetic about that by the next morning you couldn't get a sentence out.
Yeah.
And I think you actually had to come back home, and we had to reschedule for.
I did. We had to reschedule. It's like Gabe has this studio rented for a couple of days, and oh my god,
hard to do when the author has laryngitis.
I remember that though, and it's one of those things, because when you're doing this, it either flows or you get that tickle in your throat that you have to start over a sentence every now and then.
Yeah. It's demanding. I don't think people understand that, is that it is physically demanding. It's exercise to do this and you do it longer than most people do. I mean, even the professional narrators I work with.
See, I only have my experience to compare this to. And so when you have told me these things through the years, I'm like, what? You have people that only work 3 hours a day?
A 4-hour reading day is about typical. Maybe 5 if someone's really good, but there's a point where you hit a wall and your voice just can't do it. And what you run the risk of is if you've worn yourself out on day 1, day 2, you sound like a different person.
Right.
And we all sound different during the course of the day anyway. You can listen to an audiobook usually, and you can tell where they stopped for the day and picked up the next day, because we all sound different in the morning than we do at night, that kind of
sometimes.
Thing. But you'll go 6, 7. We've had an 8-hour reading day,
right?
And I think your public speaking and your stand-up comedy has helped you with that, because you're used to having to do
muscles in my throat,
right. But it is amusing to and I've shared that with people before. It's like, who's the cleanest reader you work with? Who does the longest, reading days? Like, well, believe it or not, it's an author. And, and we've done a literal full day, session before, and he pulled it off,
I'm surprised. All right. I guess I was surprised when I found out that you don't have many authors read their books.
Not a lot. It's changing. The thing about audiobooks right now is the landscape is really changing. It's the fastest growing part of the publishing industry, so it's kind of an exciting thing to be in. And
sure.
You're
the man.
I've been in this a lot longer than it was successful. When I first got into it, I'd been doing video production for years. I was a video producer for 10 years before I ever did an audiobook.
Right.
But we were going to get rid of them because at the time it just wasn't something that it was still on CD. Digital audio was not a thing yet. iTunes wasn't a thing yet, and it really didn't make a whole lot of sense because we had this warehouse that was stockpiled with audio CDs that didn't move, and it cost you money to have them sit in the warehouse. So we looked at getting rid of it, and I got into it with the idea of trying to save some money. Could we pull it off? Could we record things in Nashville because we have so many great studios? Could we do it on a budget and make it work? That just seems like a different lifetime because that was mid 2000s, and we're doing 15 to 20 audiobooks a year, and now it's 400 to 500, and it's good business. It's what people are expecting. There's so many people now that's how they engage a book. There's a lot of people that know you through your voice on an audiobook that have never picked up a hardback book that you've ever written.
Isn't that odd?
Cool.
I was on an airplane a few months ago with a guy. As I said, with the guy, this guy was sitting next to me, and when the flight attendant came by, I said, I would like a cran apple, just a cran apple with water and a lot of ice. And she said, okay. She took his order, and then he says to me, would I have heard you talking somewhere before? Like, yeah, maybe. Maybe. But when you one of the things that has been cool to me is when I do these books with you, it's easier for me because you are a good audience. And we have somehow come to this odd thing through the years that you show up with me and you will have not read the book. So I get to read it to you. And I'm kind of reading to you. So, and there's a lot of times in the middle of a chapter that I want to stop and go, hey, did you hear that part? You like that part? So
yeah, we had a few of those this week.
Right. So that is that's very interesting to me. How many times do you have? So here's one of those times.
You've been reading too long this week.
I've been reading too long. How many times do you have situations where maybe a reader is forced on you, like an author is, like the author's people say the author is reading this book, and then you get in the studio and find out, well, it would be good if the author could read.
It happens. Sometimes it happens without the authors really wanting it. That's the fun part is when they get into it.
Like, give me an example. You don't have to mention a name.
Okay, I won't give you a name. One of my favorites happened. This has been a very long time ago, and I wouldn't want to embarrass the guy, but pretty big author. In his particular area of writing, he's well known, has a lot of followers.
Right.
As it turns out, he didn't ask to read his audiobook. It was something his agent decided he needed to do.
Those demon agents.
Those agents, And so he walked into the studio day one. I should back up and say, for most books, we'll schedule about 3 days for reading. That usually we'll cover it because you're going to finish somewhere between day 2 and day 3, and you've got the 3 days booked, so you're safe. So that's what I had booked. Not a cheap studio. Music Row on Nashville, it's
you're
good.
Paying full price.
Yeah, you're paying for the service. So he walked in day one, super nice guy. We chatted for a minute, and then all right, it's time to get going. And so he starts sitting over in the isolation booth, and we're getting him set up. And he looks at the engineer and looks at me, and he kind of grins. He says, "Gosh, I hope they told you I'm dyslexic." And we thought he was kidding.
Right.
9 days later. He was not kidding.
Oh, no.
That's still the longest it's ever taken for us to record an author. And it was, he was miserable. That's I felt so sorry for the guy because, by the end of day 3, and we're not even a third the way through a 230-page book, and he just looked defeated. But he wasn't going to quit.
Right.
And we literally recorded that book one sentence at a time, multiple takes per sentence until we had it. And I still wake up shivering sometimes in the middle of the night.
I'll bet.
That was the worst. There have been others. But usually it's not because the author insisted on it. Usually it's because someone that they work with
Somebody
said,
else.
you got to read this.
Yeah.
But as you and I have talked about many times, the narrator of an audiobook can make or break that book. There are authors who should be doing it. There's nobody but you should be reading your books. But there are some times when it really is a lot better if they pass that over to a voice actor who can deliver it.
One of my favorite authors is James Lee Burke, and he has who is the guy? It's an actor. I can't think of the guy's name right now, but man, he is so good. He's really good, except that he mispronounces a couple of words. And I always think, and because they're Southern words, okay, and so it drives me insane because James Lee Burke is a Southern writer. I mean, this is, he's writing about New Orleans and Louisiana and the swamps and this kind of stuff, and this guy is going, and across the lily pads, you could hear the bass and bream as they're hit. And I'm like, it's not bream. It's not. And I'm like, what? Because see, when I do this with you, people, I think people are surprised to find out that I will write words that somehow, because of my Southern upbringing or something, I'm not pronouncing it exactly correctly. And you call me on it. You say, hey, back up. I think you want mischievous on that instead of
not
mischievous.
Right.
And so, but I always wonder when I hear somebody like, where's the Gabe? Where's the Gabe in the studio?
It's so different when that microphone's in front of you. I do this for a living on the other side of the microphone.
Right.
But I'll usually read 1 or 2 books a year, narrate them myself, more than anything, just to make sure I'm on that other side of it and I can empathize more with, the people I put through this. And it's always a humbling experience. I think I know how to tell people to pace themselves. And then if I'm doing it, that's all out the window.
Right.
And then I get scathing reviews on Audible because I mispronounce words and I should know better. And
but see, I
don't ever look those up.
I know. Well, I put that blame on whoever it is that's supposed to know. I'm just a stupid performer. You're the one. You're the expert in Southern literature. You're the one who's supposed to know all this. So and you do. You make me look good. You make my audiobooks look good. But I mean, I've heard the Audible version of 10 different James Lee Burke books where the guy says bream and pirogue instead of piro. And so it's crazy. I was listening to an audiobook that was produced by Audible the other day. And I marked the place because I wanted to play it for Polly because the narrator says familiar. And she was so familiar. And I'm like, Gabe would have shot me from the other room.
I don't know. I mean, you and I are both from Alabama. I mean, there's certain graces that are allowed with certain words.
Right. Oh, sure.
You don't say restaurant, which is what my wife says I say. So, you're not quite that bad yet.
Well, we do say that in our own private lives.
Right.
But then, you get in front of the microphone, you try to make it sound... Because I have people say sometimes, wow, I listen to your audiobooks and you don't sound like you're from Alabama. And I'm like, yeah, I don't when I'm doing the audiobook.
Our first day here this week, I don't remember what word it was, but I'm sitting over here in the control booth with Matt, your excellent engineer, and you read something, and he leaned over and said, that's the first time he said that right.
Did you ask him, why haven't you corrected him, Matt?
Well, it's local color until it's in an audiobook. And then,
That's true. That's true. Have you had situations where somebody came in and they really surprised you in a good way, that you thought, this is probably going to be tough, and it ended up I mean, how has that?
Yeah, and I will share a name on that one. I had the pleasure of working with the late great Charlie Daniels on his biography, his autobiography that he published with us a couple of years ago, and Charlie. I'd gotten to work with him before on some other stuff, but never an audiobook, and I had no idea how nitpicky this man was. I mean, just perfectionist doesn't come close to it.
Right.
And all I know is thank God we were using his studio behind his house, and it wasn't somebody else having to, hire out for this.
Right.
Because he literally re-recorded the entire thing at least 3, if not 4 times. And I got scared to death by the time the thing, we're hitting deadlines, and I would call his engineer up and say, hey, I know he's finished reading it. Are we close to having an edit? And he'd say, well, Charlie decided to go in again last night, and we re-recorded another 3 or 4 chapters again. So I got a little nervous that it wasn't gonna come together, but boy, it did. And it just the end result, it was a labor of love for him, and you can tell.
Sure.
It just turned out to be a fantastic audiobook. But yeah, that's one of those where halfway through I would have not put money on it.
I'm going to get that one because I knew Charlie, and I really liked him a lot. I did a bunch of shows with him when I used to do the National Network.
Mm-hmm, right.
And
right.
It was about, I don't know, it's maybe about 10 or 12 years ago. I was somewhere, and he was there, and it was kind of an event, and somebody came to me and said, hey, it's Charlie's birthday tonight. Would you kind of make the announcement for everybody and tell Charlie I had a birthday? I said, sure, I'd be glad to. And so I got up and I said, Charlie, come here. And he gets up and I said, buddy, I said a couple of things that I wanted to say to you tonight. One is for everybody, I wanted to say happy birthday. I wanted to say happy birthday. And everybody clapped. I said, it's your 70th birthday. So happy birthday. And everybody clapped. And I said, the other thing I wanted to say is, most of us in this room thought you were 70 20 years ago, something like that. But he is such a good sport. Mm-hmm. But you can tell by his music, he is. And I think, I think that musicians, I think they might be a little more careful about that than regular writers, because I know that, I was talking to Don Reed the other day with the Statler Brothers, and Jimmy Yeary is a friend of mine, and Anthony Crawford. These are songwriters, and I got 80,000 words in this. They give me 80,000 words to tell a story. Mm-hmm. These guys are having to do it in 2.5 minutes.
Right.
And so every word does have to be.
It works against them when they're trying to read a book. Because they're used to that world where they're going to spend 2 or 3 days on that 2.5 minutes.
Right.
And you go over it again and again and again, and you're re-recording just little phrases and little words and single notes and that kind of thing. And we don't have the luxury of that when we're doing something that's long form. But right. They still approach it that way sometimes.
Yeah, I can see that.
It can be stressful for them.
I tend to write like I hear it anyway. Mm-hmm. And so when I get in and start doing that, we don't change much. Occasionally, when we're doing an audible, you and I will look at each other and go, it says something about writing here. Do we make it listening? Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's do it. And it's also curious the choices that we make, like today, when we were finishing this up, there was a choice where somebody was talking about something Jones had said. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of stopped and I said, so Gabe, do I do that in Jones' voice or do I, right? So these are choices that if somebody's reading the printed book, I guess they're making those choices in their head. But right. With what we're doing, we're making those choices for them.
Yep. And that's the time when it's great to have the author reading, because you know what these people sound like.
Yeah.
And no one else does.
Now, see, now what you said right there, Talk to me about this, because I've heard you mentioned before having issues after the fact with like fiction authors, right? Somebody's written fiction and now their book has been put on audio. So what happens?
It's always fiction, and it's thankfully we haven't gone through this with yours. When you decide this is what Genghis Khan sounds like, or this is what Joshua Chamberlain sounds like, nobody's going to argue with you.
Right.
And I'm not going to argue with you. Although I really think Genghis Khan probably didn't sound as French as you played.
Well, I'll tell you this.
That's my
He
opinion.
doesn't sound like John Wayne.
No, that's
you
true.
can look up, because he was cast in a movie. As Genghis Khan. They taped his eyes, and it's hilarious. You can see it on YouTube, because he goes, because he's John Wayne. He's like, who brought this Tartar woman to me? It's horrible. It's just horrible. Anyway, go ahead.
With fiction, though, I do have times when an author will get upset after the fact, because most fiction authors don't read their own stuff, which actually kind of makes sense, because if you think about it, fiction is usually more like drama. There's all these different characters. There's a lot more. Let's say there's more dynamics in a novel than you would find in nonfiction, and and we've got great voice actors that we work with who win awards and do great work. But they're interpreting as an actor would. And so unless an author has said ahead of time, well, now, bear in mind that, Cleo in chapter 2 sounds like this, And
but
we don't know.
To me, shouldn't they have put it in there? That's what she sounds like.
I think sometimes it's in their head and they don't think about that needs to be communicated,
So they're upset with you that their character didn't come out on audio like it sounded in their mind?
Sometimes. It happens. Yeah, it happens.
How is anybody supposed to know what's in their mind?
I don't know.
And why would it matter, really?
Well, that's the fun part, is to get to try to, kindly say, well, you're the only one that knows that that's what this person sounds like.
Right.
So, we've now given another alternate voice that won't be argued about by anybody else. So, just enjoy it.
One of the funniest things, I was thinking about this the other day, because somebody was asking about the voices, because I shift the voices, and I try, I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and so I hear some that are great, and I hear some that I can't bear. And so I don't like listening to a female reader that, she has her voice like this, and then all of a sudden she's reading a man. Go down to the store, he said. And it's like, golly, because you want to drift through this, in my opinion. And so, I just want to, like, if I'm doing a female, I just want to lighten it a little bit. I don't want to make it sound like, boy, Andy, that sounds so odd. But when you're doing these things and you're doing so many different voices, it is funny, because, sometimes, because you have stopped me before and said, hey, your guy at the grocery store is sounding kind of like Jones now. Like, oh, okay. All right, sorry, let's back up.
Yeah, the hardest thing I think about reading dialogue, and you usually nail this just fine, but occasionally I've had to stop you on it, where you'll read in this character's voice, and then you give a little narrator's aside. He said as he was going down the street, and he picked up, and it's hard not to have that narrator all of a sudden sound like the guy you were just doing.
Right. Right.
Now, it's really confusing when you have 30 characters in a scene.
Oh my God.
I thought we'd never get through the final summit.
I thought we'd never get through it. Yeah, I thought we'd never. I swore I'd never write another book with that many characters.
There is a page in that book. I have to go back and verify, but I guarantee there's a page in that book when you hear from at least 7 different historical figures in 3 paragraphs, and it's Joan of Arc and Anne Frank and Genghis Khan and Lincoln and Churchill, and it's like
we still laugh about you. You remember? Do you remember when we were recording The Traveler's Gift? And we kind of go, what would what would King Solomon sound like?
Right.
And we're like, well, I don't know. And go, well, he was Jewish, and remember, do you remember what we did? We went and got Benjamin Netanyahu, got a speech of his.
Right.
And like I listened to it, and I did, I just tried to do Benjamin Netanyahu's voice for King Solomon.
Mm-hmm. Well, and to share a trade secret on that, every time we picked Solomon back up in that book, we went back and rewound and played what you'd done before, so you could go back and remember.
So I could remember it. Oh my God!
It's impossible to keep up with it. I think it's easier, and I've enjoyed the Jones books, watching you be more at ease doing it, because a lot of these are people that you know. I've gotten to meet a few of them this week. It's kind of fun,
Right.
So you're not at that point having to conjure up voices. You're doing impressions. Yeah.
That's true. That is true. One character, especially in this book, that my wife and my boys and I have done his voice for years. A guy named Mike Martin, and Mike talks like this, and I have him in the book explaining what happened to Blair Houston Star. And so, but that's how he sounds. So I didn't really have to make a voice choice on that.
Right.
I'm doing an impression. You're right.
We didn't rewind a single time this time to have to go back and say, how'd you voice that guy 3 chapters ago?
I know, because we have done that before. Or do they play that now? What did I've kind of got Jones down. I've kind of got him set, but that's an impression too. I just remember the guy. It's like, but I tell you this, it's weird when I'm trying to do my wife's voice, and I just I know I don't do that right. And how can you do that? I try to tell her, I said, well, I'm just trying to think, what's that, shoot, I wish I could think. There's that girl that married the rock guy. She married like 50 people. Pamela.
Oh, Pamela Anderson?
Yeah, Pamela.
Yeah.
But Polly's like, oh my. And I said, oh yeah, I just try to think Pamela Anderson. And she goes, oh, shut up.
Has Polly ever commented on any lines that you had to voice as her in your books?
No. No. She's.
Just rolls her eyes and moves on.
Yeah. No, but that's pretty much what she does with me every day, all day. So, yeah. So what have you got coming up? What are you?
Man, some fun projects. There's one that we just launched into that I'm particularly excited about. The cool thing about the publisher I work for is we really run the gamut on different kind of books and projects, and so it's different from week to week. But we're actually going to work on a New Testament that is read by people of faith within the country music world. And that's going to be kind of fun.
Man, I'm going into comedy overload right now.
Oh, I know. There's things you can do with that for sure, but it's fun though, because I spend so much of my time in and out of studios in Nashville, and you're always bumping into people.
Sure.
And it's in my world, I never get to work with those guys, So this is going to be a chance to do that.
I wish some of them were still alive. Hello, I'm Moses. That would have been Old Testament, I guess.
And Grandpa Jones is Noah.
Yeah. Mary Magdalene, Minnie Pearl, howdy. You would have way too much fun.
Yep. Yeah. No, that's going to be a fun project, and. I tell you what's been really amusing is for some reason they've put Spanish audio on me in the last little bit. I don't speak a word of Spanish. I know Mas Tequila Por Favor, and that's about it. And so to get these projects, it's like, are they recorded correctly? I don't know. Did it sound? I don't know.
Have you had to sit in and monitor a Spanish speaking?
Yeah. We did. One of the first ones I had to work on was when HarperCollins put out Harper Lee's sequel to To Kill a Mockingbird, Go Set a Watchman.
Right.
HarperCollins, our parent company in New York, did the English version, but we ended up doing the Spanish release of that. And so, and that one was such a big deal from a book standpoint that that I had to go be there for the session. And I told the publisher, I don't understand a word of Spanish, but I sat there.
What did they say? Just act like you do?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think my role was to guard the manuscript. I think I was security. That was my role.
They chain it to your wrist.
I had to walk around with it in a case for a week, and at the end of every session, I had to take the manuscript back from the narrator and back from the engineer, put it in the case, and bring it back the next day. It was weird. That was fun. But I literally spent 3 days of my life sitting with this manuscript, listening to someone speak a language I don't understand, and just trying to make sure that what I was reading seemed like what they were saying. And I didn't interrupt them very often to say, "Oh, you misread, Mas tequila, por favor."
Right, that would have driven me insane.
It was fun.
Good, Gary. Buddy, thanks for being here.
Man, thank you. This has been a pleasure.
Thanks for doing this.
To be able to come down here and do one of these in this place, this has been such a treat. And I'll put a plug in. It's everything that he writes. It keeps getting better, and this one is no exception. This is going to be a great book.
Thank you. I'm very excited about it. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks, buddy. Pleasure.
I'm Andy Andrews, the professional noticer, harnessing common sense and wisdom to plow through challenges all the way to an answer for you. Hey, quick question. Where do you seek wisdom? Allow me to suggest wisdomharbor.com. That's HARBOUR.com. People are finding amazing value in wisdomharbor.com for their families, for schools, for businesses. Hey, you got a 30-day free trial. Go there. Take the tour. Look, see what's happening. Do it for your family. Do it for your business. Do it for yourself. Wisdomharbor.com. And I think that'll do it for this week. Get us out of here, Matthew. So, ladies and gentlemen, and to the boys and girls who aspire to become ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of another episode of The Professional Noticer. In a world where common sense has become a superpower, I'm harnessing the mental energy I have for you, seeking wisdom, making observations, and endeavoring to answer tough questions in a way that will empower your family and your business. I'm Andy Andrews. Until next week, smile while you talk, even with the mask on. Don't breathe anybody else's air, but make sure you have a positive answer to the question, how's it going? So, until next week, goodbye. This episode of The Professional Noticer was produced by Matt Limpert. The Noticer theme, written and performed by Sugarcane Jane. Ultra Fine Point Sharpies, provided by Twinkle and Smoke of Beverly Hills. Additional financial consideration provided by grandmasdirections.com. At grandmasdirections.com, you can get directions for anywhere you're going, and you can get them in that old-fashioned description way that you can only get from someone who refuses to acknowledge that there is a thing called GPS. Trying to find your way to the new restaurant on the other side of the town? Just put your destination into grandmasdirections.com and you'll be there in no time. Simply print out our step-by-step instructions. Once you make a right at the stop sign and go down about a mile, maybe where Mr. Taylor's barbershop used to be. You know, your father just loved that place. Well, the road just after that is where you'll make another right to get on the interstate, but I'd suggest you just take the side road that runs parallel to the interstate because those trucks are so big and they're just going to run you into a wall. You know you've gone far enough when you see the sculpture, that one with those wind chimes that those strange kids from the art school put up. At least they're supposed to be artists, but that's just a bunch of junk. Anyhow, you're almost there, and you'll know before you pass that sculpture junk. Before you pass it, turn left, and you'll see the restaurant on the right. You can't miss it. Best meat in 3 I've been to since before your granddaddy decided to stay in Korea. That's grandmasdirections.com.